The Palestinian resistance movement Hamas has called on the international community to help end the Israeli plight of the Palestinian children. In a statement, Hamas said the regime has been denying children's access to treatment, medicine, and food by maintaining its crippling blockade on the Gaza Strip. It said that Tel Aviv also keeps abducting and jailing minors, and in some cases killing or placing them under house arrest. Hamas noted that the Israeli regime uses the worst type of psychological and physical torture against Palestinian children. The statement was issued on the occasion of International Day of Innocent Children Victims of Aggression. Hamas said that over 24 Palestinian children have been killed in Israeli custody this year so far. Let's take a look at this issue with Mohammed Abu Sada, who's a professor of political science at Al-Azhar University, joining us from Gaza City. You know, when you take a look at the siege on Gaza, one of the things that is very concerning and, in a sense, disappointing before we start the conversation is the fact that it's not part of the discourse. It's not part of the conversation. And you know, with news, this shouldn't be news that gets old when you have so many people that are under the siege. Why do you think it is that when you're looking at the situation as dire and severe as it is, that it's not covered, maybe we shouldn't say on a daily basis, but at least on a weekly basis, at least for there to be a reference to it?
Good evening. It's true. The Gaza Strip has been put under extreme Israeli siege and blockade for the past 17 years, since the summer of 2006. And daily life with the Palestinians have been going from bad to worse as a result of this Israeli siege and blockade, which has very much crippled the daily life of more than 2 million Palestinians in Gaza, and also has affected all aspects of Palestinian life, whether it's health care, food security, access and movement, all of that. And unfortunately, this Israeli siege and blockade, which has been going on for a long time now, and by the way, it has been classified by the international community as Gaza has been classified as the largest open-air prison on the face of earth as a result of this Israeli siege, because of the restriction of movement and also the control of Israeli occupation forces on entry and exit of the more than 2 million Palestinians who live in Gaza, which has very much made the life of the Palestinians in Gaza as a nightmare as a result of a number of things. One is continuation of Israeli aggression and continuation of Israeli military escalation against the Gaza Strip, and to name the last one, which just happened early last month, month of May, and also restriction of movement of the Palestinians in and out of Gaza. And all in addition to that, the Israelis very much, the Israeli occupation forces control the amount of goods and services that enter Gaza from the Israeli border crossing. All of that has very much led to the crippling of the daily life of the Palestinians, and also made the Palestinians, especially Palestinian children, suffer from psychological problems as a result of the continuation of Israeli aggression and war crimes against the Palestinians in Gaza.
There is one particular site that we reference to by the name of pchrgaza.org that does cite the violations that take place on a daily basis, and it is on a daily basis, that happen not only in the occupied territories but also in Gaza. And what's very discerning about this is the fact that you're looking at the fact that, for example, when you have these incursions or you have these military attacks by Israel, the aftermath, people who get injured, people who need medical attention that it cannot be provided inside Gaza, that later on either succumb to their injuries or don't receive the attention, and one way or another suffer through life. And we know how many times and how often Israel actually carries out these military attacks. Isn't that against international law for there not to be given the type of medicinal attention for people, for example, in Gaza, whether from sickness of natural causes or from injuries sustained from Israeli military incursions?
That is definitely a very serious issue, and I'm very happy that you brought it up here to discuss it. Let me say that over the past 17 years, Israel has carried many wars and many aggressions against the Palestinians in Gaza, and every time there is a military escalation between the Palestinian resistance and the Israeli occupation forces, Israel very much lock and close the gates of Gaza with the West Bank, with Jerusalem, and with Israel, where most of the Palestinian health cases are transferred to the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and sometimes to Israeli hospitals, especially patients with cancer, patients with kidney problems, and other serious problems that cannot be treated in Gaza. And let me just give you one simple example. When Israel carried out its attack against Gaza in early May of this year, and the border crossings were closed for 5 continuous days, many Palestinian sick people could not get health treatment or medical treatment, especially people with kidney problems, cancer problems, because of the closure of the border crossings between Gaza and Israel. And that is just one example to name of many other tactics that is used by the Israeli forces to humiliate the Palestinians in general and try to extort Palestinian patients and Palestinian medical cases. To just name another example here, which has been documented by WHO, the World Health Organization, in addition to many Palestinian human rights, that many Palestinian sick people who travel between Gaza and West Bank and East Jerusalem, who have to go and pass through Israeli occupation forces, many of these sick Palestinians, some of them get arrested, some of their accompanying relatives get arrested by the Israeli intelligence services, and in many cases, the Israeli intelligence services sometimes extort Palestinian sick people by trying to make them collaborate with the Israeli intelligence services in exchange for the medical treatment or to allow them to pass from Gaza to the West Bank and East Jerusalem. These are just a number of few examples that can be given about Israeli violation of international law and Israeli so to speak, Israeli criminal acts against the Palestinians, especially the civilian population.
I want to get your reaction in closing here, quickly if you can, on a person from Gaza that says the siege of Gaza did not start 15 years ago or 22 years ago. It started 30 years ago with the signing of the Oslo Accords, and even before that, Israel and the U.S. saw Gazans as an inconvenience, a surplus population they need to get rid of one way or another. Do you agree with this person's view?
Well, that is a very contentious issue, and it depends on who you talk to. Some very much say that the Israeli regime of closure and restriction of movement of the Palestinians in Gaza started with the establishment of the Palestinian Authority in 1994 after the signing of the Oslo Agreement, which was signed on September 13 of 1994. And once the Palestinian Authority was established, Israel created this system of restriction of movement and closure against the Gaza Strip. But what is noted here is that the level of the Israeli siege, the level of Israeli blockade, and the number of restrictions that have been imposed on the more than 2 million Palestinians in Gaza were created very much after Hamas won the Palestinian elections, legislative elections, in January 2006. And this siege and blockade went from bad to worse after the Palestinian resistance groups led by Hamas abducted the Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit on June of 2006, and things became horrible after Hamas took seize of the Gaza Strip in the summer of 2007, in which Israel classified Gaza as a hostile entity. And from that time, things have been going not just from bad to worse, but we are very much living a humanitarian crisis here in Gaza as a result of these Israeli tactics and measures against the Palestinians here in Gaza.
Yeah, but at the same time, when you talk about Hamas, they were elected by the people there in Gaza, and perhaps based on many accounts and polls and people that you ask, they remain part of the resistance groups altogether as the only hope for there to be any type of success against the Israeli regime.
It's true. I'm not debating that. I totally agree with you that Hamas won an election that was classified by the international community, by the U.S., by Europe, and many outside observers. These elections that were held in January 2006 were classified as democratic and transparent elections. But unfortunately, the international community, which is represented by the U.S. and EU, did not recognize these elections, did not recognize the legitimacy of Hamas, who won these elections, and from the beginning tried to isolate Hamas and to push it into the corner to try to extort Hamas to accept the so-called Quartet 3 conditions, which is recognizing Israel, renouncing the so-called terrorism, which is Palestinian struggle against the occupation, and also accepting the agreement between the PLO and Israel. But from the beginning, it was a problem with the international community. It was a problem with the Israeli occupation, who did not recognize and deal with the outcome of the Palestinian democratic elections that were held in January 2006.
Thank you so much for your contribution. We do appreciate that. Khaber Abu Sada there, Professor of Political Science at Al-Azhar University. Thank you so much.
It's always my pleasure to be with you.